So I will first give you an introduction into Horizon 2020 in general and the current work program. As I said, I will just give you some examples of core topics that I thought might be of interest to some of the groups present. I'll very briefly explain the bottom-up funding opportunities and some cross-cutting aspects. But now, before I start talking to you for half an hour about Horizon 2020, I'd like to briefly know how many of you have been involved in proposals to EU calls so far? So quite a few. And how many are actually active in EU projects or have been active in running projects? So still a minority, but quite a few of the partners. So as I expected, the audience here is very diverse. With some of you, you have your experts in Horizon 2020, much more than I am, because I'm still a generalist, because I'm covering a program that is very broad. And some of you probably have limited experience. So I very much hope that I won't bore those who are experts themselves and still don't confuse those who haven't been in touch with EU funding so far too much. Now, Horizon 2020 is actually the 8th EU framework program for research and innovation. So far, they've been numbering FP1 to FP7. When they developed the 8th framework program, they thought, well, this is going to be so much better, so much easier to participate, so much different. So we don't want to just call it FP8, they called it Horizon 2020, to everyone's confusion. It has a considerable budget of about 80 billion euros. Now, Switzerland could not get fully associated to the program from the very start, as we have been for previous framework programs, due to the vote on the mass immigration initiative. But since the beginning of 2017, Switzerland is a fully associated member to Horizon 2020. So EU groups have the absolutely same rights and obligation as any other group in an EU member state. And this is something that we still have to deal with a lot of confusion in the European communities because of that lack of full association in the very beginning. Now, this program, as you see already from the budget, it's very broad, and it really funds all stages of research and innovation, from very basic research to first market replication. It has a very strong focus on impact and innovation, and the actual funding opportunities, the calls, they are described in so-called work programs. Now, this is the first time that the work programs span 2 call years. And even the last one spans 3 call years, which is really nice for planning in advance where you might be interested to submit. And this is how the program is structured into 3 pillars. In the first pillar, on excellent science, it's really the scientists to define the agenda. So there you find a lot of the bottom-up funding opportunities where researchers define their project content. In the middle pillar, on industrial leadership, as the name says, it's mainly industry who is in the driver's seat in defining the projects and the calls. And in the third pillar, on societal challenges, as the name says, this is really about contributing to tackling big European or often even global societal challenges. So it's really the challenges are the everyday challenges that society faces, where research wants to contribute to. Now, 2 characteristics of most of the core topics in pillars 2 and 3 that seem very crucial to keep in mind from the very beginning. The first one is that the topics are defined top-down. That is, the European Commission, in a very lengthy process involving consultation with a lot of stakeholders, define what they want to spend funding on. So you can have a splendid idea for research or innovation that even fits the general goal of the European Commission or the EC policies, but as long as there is no concrete call topic that asks for exactly that project, you will have no chance to get funded. So this is really a very special mindset that one has to get used to. And the second one is that normally it's research consortia, or not even research consortia, but consortia that are funded. So it's not you as a PI, or you as a group, or you as an organization that applies for funding, but you do that in collaboration, typically not with different other academic partners, but typically you'll have industry partners on board, you'll have NGOs on board, you'll have maybe partners from the public administration on board and form a research consortia. Now, the minimum condition normally is that you need to have at least 3 different partners from 3 different EU member states and associated country, but typically it's many more. And how many partners you have in your proposal and what kind of partners they are, with what kind of background and expertise and access to data and information really depends on the individual call topics. The EC also defines for each call topic, define the so-called type of action. And what is important to keep in mind that for consolidate coordination and support actions and innovation actions, there typically is very little research wanted. So it's really the research and innovation actions, mainly where academic research groups participate. Sometimes also there is some research activities in the other two types of action, but I think it's important once you identify the call topic that sounds interesting that you check straight ahead whether it's an innovation action or a research and innovation action. Now the word innovation appears again and again in those top documents and call topics, and I would like just to stress at this stage that by innovation the EC does not restrict themselves to technical innovation. Many times it's really all different types of innovation that normally are tackled or should be tackled by the projects, and also they want you to look at all different types of innovations that a certain issue could attract. So it's also public in innovation in public management, innovation in business models, social innovation, and so on. And sometimes, of course, also or only technical innovation. Again, this is defined by the call topic and especially by the expected impact that is defined. Now this graph shows the evolution of the yearly budget of the framework programs since the creation of Framework Program 1 in 1984, and you see that the budgets have been steadily increasing. Now last autumn, the work program for the last years of Horizon has been published, spanning the years 18, 19, and 20. And if you look at this graph, this is the largest amount of funding that's on the table for which information is available at this moment. So this, for us, is really an exciting moment, and I think also for you, it's a really good moment to have a look at the EU framework programs and check whether there could be a topic where you would be interested to contribute to, because the chances that there is a call topic around that matches your interest is bigger than ever since. There is about 460 individual call topics of the course 18, 19, and 20, for which there is information at the moment. Now the EC defined some overarching priorities for the work program 18 to 20. Interestingly, two of them, a low carbon climate resilient future and circular economy, are topics that I think are very much also reflected in the issues that you will do research on in the National Research Program. And then there is two additional such integrating focus areas that there is a lot of topics on. Now I mentioned there is a lot of topics for which we have information on at the moment. I also mentioned that I don't think it's only Society Challenge 5 on climate action, environment, resource efficiency, and raw materials is probably relevant for you, but other societal challenges as well. So the big question is, how can you find out in which areas there are topics of interest to you? It's really quite an endeavor, but the EC developed a really nice portal, the so-called participant portal, which has a really good search engine. So for example, here, I'll see whether this works. Oops, whether this works. Excuse me. Doesn't work so much. And here I just entered in the screenshot, I just entered the Notion business models. And the system came out with 25 concrete call topics where business models are somewhere mentioned in the topic, in the call text, in the expected impacts, and so on. Now, by screening those through those, for some of them, business models only play a minor role. For some of them, it's not the way you do research on business models on and so forth. But it's a really nice tool to find your way around by just playing around and using different sets of keywords. Then, for each of those call topics on the platform, there is a link where you have the entire call text, so the entire scope of the project, the entire expected impact. You have all this information then on one side. Typically, you have like 1 to 2 A4 pages of detailed topic descriptions. So those are really just the titles. And because they're consortium projects and because many of them are really large, sometimes it's 10, sometimes 15 million euros that the EC is ready to spend. So typically you'll not find a topic where you say, well, yeah, this is my area of expertise. This is, you know, what I'm doing research on. But typically you'll say, well, this is of real interest to us, and we think we can contribute with part of the solution. But of course, because it's consortium program, you're not suggested, you're not supposed to be able to tackle the entire core topic. Now, as I mentioned before, I will, with the examples I give you of open or forthcoming topics, I will mainly focus on two of the societal challenges. That's Societal Challenge 5 on climate action, environment, resource efficiency, and raw materials. And I'm the Swiss national contact person for this part of Horizon 2020. Also, we realized that your background also is reflected in quite a few topics of societal challenge too, on food, on sustainable agriculture and forestry and so on. Now I must say at this point already, for this societal challenge, it's my colleague Erhard Gass who is the national contact person, so I'm much less familiar with those topics. From those two societal challenges, I won't be able to give you an overview about all the core topics, and some of them are probably a bit less relevant. So I picked just 5 areas: circular economy, decarbonization, climate change adaptation, biodiversity and ecosystem services, and sustainable cities. Now, this is more or less, it's a semi-informed choice by looking you know, at your affiliations, by looking at the goals of the National Research Program. So it's really more or less random, and just to give you an idea on the type of core topics that the EC is putting forward. Now, starting with core topics in the area of the circular economy, these are very much derived from a very ambitious action plan on the circular economy that the Juncker Commission presented in December 2015. So you find much of the core topics directly derived from that action plan. There is also a lot of resources on Europe's side on the circular economy. They have a really nice website and also a so-called stakeholder platform that they launched, I think, last year, where you find a lot of additional resources and background information, and also information on groups, governments, countries that are very active in this area. They also plan they organize a big so-called stakeholder conference on the circular economy, I think in about a month time in Brussels. So the EC is very active in this area, and of course if you apply to a topic on the circular economy, you don't need to be familiar with all the policy and background, but a lot of times it helps to just be familiar a little bit, just to set the projects in the bigger context and understand where they come from with their goals. Now, as for concrete core topics, there is one, for example, on an independent testing program on premature obsolescence. That's a research and innovation action. Then there is one on sustainable processing and refining of primary and secondary raw materials, which already goes kind of in the area of raw materials. Then for 2020, there is a topic plan to understand the transition to a circular economy and its implication on society, on the economy, on the environment, a very broad view. Now, I also placed links to the concrete call texts there, and I guess you can distribute or make the presentation available to all the participants later on, so you find the direct links to the details. I also should say that in Societal Challenge 5, the calls 2018, they all, except the coordination and support action, they all follow a 2-stage submission and evaluation mode. That is, by the first deadline, you only submit a 10-page summary of your project idea and the expected impact. And then that is screened, and you're invited over summertime to present a full proposal, which is roughly 60 to 70 pages a lot of the times. But you already, of course, need to have built your consortium, you already have to have your project idea matured to write the 10-pager. And the deadline for the 10-pager, that's already at the end of February. So if you identify a topic for 2018 that might be of interest, the time is probably not enough for you to take a lead and to coordinate an application. But it might well be that a strong core consortium is looking for additional expertise where you could fit in, and we can also help you to find out who is preparing for something on a European level. The 19 topics, you have lots of time. The deadline there is in February 2019. Now for the 2020 topics, they have no hyperlink. And that's for a good reason, because at the moment we only have an indication on the title. So those have not been defined yet, and it's not even 100% sure that the title will stay stable like that, but I think it still gives you a glimpse on where it could go after 2019. Plus, if you're really interested in one of those 2020 topics that are also published publicly, it might be an opportunity to try and actually give the Commission some hints on where you think this should go in detail. And for that as well, you can contact us and we can give you some further contact information and some advice on how to go about. Also in the area of food, there is a couple of topics on the circular economy. For example, citizen-driven food system approaches in cities, innovation in valorizing urban bio-waste. Again, foreseen for 2020, diversifying farmers' income through small bio-based concepts, and circular bio-based business models for rural communities. Now, for some of the topics, sometimes I ask myself, well, how much is that really a circular economy topic? And the Commission also, of course, they have some goals and how much funding they have to spend in this priority areas. But if you read the detailed text, I think it becomes more apparent. In the area of decarbonization, there is a topic open now on supporting the development of climate policies, and one foreseen for the last year on the role of lifestyle changes and consumption patterns on climate change mitigation. In the area of food, there is also a topic on climate smart, resilient farming, and on forest soil research and innovation action, and also one on sustainable wood value chains. In the area of climate change adaptation, there is a topic on climate change impacts on health in Europe and on global climate change impacts from a European perspective. So climate change impacts that happen elsewhere in the world and have an impact on European economy or society or migration and so on. And there, one specific one on human dimensions of climate change with a focus on migration. In the area of biodiversity and ecosystem services, there is not a huge amount of topics in the work program. It's one on the interrelation between climate change, biodiversity, and ecosystem services for 2019, and one on understanding the water, energy, food nexus. However, in the area of biodiversity and ecosystem services, there is a so-called ERANET active. It's the Biodiversa ERANET. Now, in ERANETs, it's national research funders who pool their resources to support transnational teams that do research in a certain area, for example, in this case in Biodiversa. And for this particular one, SNSF is full partner in that area, so you're fully eligible for funding in Biodiversa. If you're working in this area, I suggest that you have a look at their website, you subscribe to their newsletter and so on, because we're not mandated to give out information on this. I follow what's happening there, but I'm not usually up to date because we're not the partner in there. But it's a really nicely established ERANET that is also used by the Commission quite often as a very nice example of an ERANET that is running very effectively. Now, in the area of sustainable cities, there is a topic closing soon on demonstrating systemic urban development for circular and regenerative cities, and one on a visionary and integrated solutions to improve well-being and health in cities for 2019. Then additional topic planned for the last year, nature-based solutions for carbon-neutral cities and improved air quality. Now, on sustainable cities, there is a lot of funding usually around in very different areas of the framework program. And on this slide, the topics are actually neither from the climate nor from the food societal challenge, but from societal challenge 3 on energy. There's a topic, or actually the first one is even from the transport work program on city-led innovation for sustainable urban mobility. And then in the energy efficient call, there is one on European cities as key innovation hubs to unlock finance for energy efficiency. Also in the energy work program, there is very large, or there has been, and there are still very large demonstration projects on smart cities and communities with a focus on energy and energy management, energy efficiency. Now this was just an overview over give you an idea of some of the core topics in those areas. We can also send you a compilation of the core topics, for example, in Societal Challenge 5 or in Societal Challenge 2. But I think maybe rather than sticking to those kind of silos, to those societal challenges, we really do best at searching by keywords in the participant portal or contacting us, and we do that search together because it helps to have some kind of pre-knowledge on the structure of Horizon 2020. Now, if you think, well, all this these top-down, defined calls are really not for you, or you scan the topics and there is nothing that's really of interest to you, you might still be interested in European funding, because in the first pillar, as I already mentioned, there are funding opportunities where you define the project. Of course, there is also some corollaries, but the core topics are not defined, typically in pillars 2 and 3. The first program there are the grants of the European Research Council that you probably all have heard about. This is research for excellent PIs doing cutting-edge research projects. You don't have to demonstrate that the results will have any impact on the society or economy or so on. It's really frontier research that is funded there. Then there is also the Future Emerging Technologies program, where research consortia define what they will research on. There it's really about initial stages to develop very innovative, groundbreaking, novel technologies. It's an extremely competitive program, of course. And there is the Marie Skłodowska-Curie action, which I guess most of you know about. These is a couple of actions that target training of young and also established researchers through Marie Skłodowska-Curie Fellowship, for example. You can attract a postdoc from abroad to work with your group for 2 years or apply for that, for example. But if you're interested in those, you can also contact us, and we have dedicated national contact points for those programs, of course, as well. Now, getting back to the collaborative projects of pillars 2 and 3, I would like to just discuss some of the cross-cutting aspects. Again, those are issues that I think are really important to keep in mind from the beginning when you set out to consider applying for EU funding. Some of these issues apply more to some topics than to others, but in general, the EC suggests that all applicants should consider them. First of all, what I already mentioned, it's all forms of innovation that should typically be considered, and it's the so-called systemic approaches that the EC is looking for. So you very rarely see, especially in the societal challenge pillar, you very rarely see core topics where you're supposed to develop or further develop one single technology to solve an issue. But a lot of times it's really about integrating or assessing different solutions that are around and really looking at the broad picture, not only looking at the impact, for example, on CO2 emissions, but also looking at societal impact of a certain solution, on economic impacts, and so on. So typically having a very broad systemic view. Co-creation is another issue that I guess you're all very familiar with already, and that puts you also in an excellent position. For some of the core topics, you see in the core text that it's even mandatory for some of the topics on the urban environment. For some of them, it's mandatory that you have a couple of city administrations as full partners in the project. to really create that added value and not, to define or to develop a solution that is completely unrealistic when you ask a city planner. So really to take different players on board in your consortium and not create, for example, a fully academic consortium to reply to the calls. International cooperation, so with that they mean cooperation with countries outside the EU member states and associated country, is also considered a so-called cross-cutting aspect. Of course, it's evident in the area of climate action, environment, resource efficiency, and raw materials when it's about, for example, helping or doing research to help implement the Paris Agreement. This is not a European consideration only, so quite naturally they want you also to try and involve partners from, for example, big emissions and so on. How this works in practice is another story. Quite often there is no co-funding mechanism, and so you have to be quite inventive to have those partners on board. But we can also help you in finding out. I think one issue that is of particular importance to this audience, and one also of my big motivations to came here and speak to you today, is the integration of social sciences and humanities. Now in FP7 there was a program on social science for social scientists and humanities with with quite some research topics, and that's when there was a topic there that was fine, and other than that they were not really considered that they should look around in other areas. Now in Horizon they made a totally different approach. There is still Societal Challenge 6 on inclusive societies, but mainly the EC considers that researchers from the social sciences and humanities should be involved in a very broad range of topics in the other societal challenges mainly, and also in some of the industrial leadership pillar, because quite naturally, if you're trying to help solving big societal challenges, you need to understand how society works, how individual works, how economy works, and so on and so forth. So that is at least the theory. So far, the results have not been overly positive. The EC, for each of the work program, they define in which topics they consider that social scientists and humanities should absolutely contribute or be included as full partners and not just as kind of service providers to the rest of the consortium. The EC monitors whether the experts who perform the evaluation actually choose projects which take that rule on board, or actually have SSH partners on board. And so far the results are mixed. Quite often it seems that proposals who have SSH partners on board are not so convincing on other aspects. So there's still, so far there have been quite a lot of projects chosen in topics where SSH researchers should have been included, where this was not the case. But the EC is very firm that they want this to take place. So any consortium who really takes this SSH integration seriously, in my opinion, has a clear competitive advantage. I think quite often it's also about communities that don't know each other and so on. But if you're from the social sciences and humanities and you're quite open to do research with natural scientists or other, people from other disciplines and background, I think you are very well thought researchers, and we would be very pleased to help you to enter competitive consortia. And I just mentioned there are 2 projects so far that implement this SSH integration quite well, I think, and have Swiss partners on board, so you might actually know this group. It's a trans-risk project looking at trajectories of climate mitigation and the risks of it, also for society, where ETH is a partner, and Aquacross that looks at aquatic biodiversity and the ecosystem services where EAWAG is a partner. Climate action and sustainable development by themselves actually are considered as so-called cross-cutting issues by the European Commission. They set a goal that they want to spend at least 35% of the total Horizon budget on projects that address climate action in one way or the other, and even more than 60% are expected to somehow involve sustainable development. Again, they lag a bit behind in reaching these goals, but not too badly. There is dispute on on the definition where a project involves sustainable development or not, of course, but still the willingness, of course, at least is clearly there. Now, if you think, well, nice, but now I have my SNSF funding and you know, I'm doing quite well. I don't really want to endeavor in getting involved with a lot of different other EU groups. You might still want to consider to register as an expert to conduct evaluations for the EC, because that puts you in a position where you see very well what is happening on European level in your area of interest. It allows you to enhance your European network. It allows you, in many cases, to have direct contacts to the people in the Commission that are then again defining the calls and looking for input from outside. We encourage you to register as an expert with the European Commission. You only flag that you're around with a certain type of expertise and background. You don't commit to anything. You might be asked by the European Commission whether you'd be willing to evaluate for a call, but you can say no case by case with no obligation at all. A lot of the successful participants say that this is where they really learned how to write. It's a lot of work, no question, but it might still be of interest. Now, finally, it was already said, at Euroresearch we have so-called national contact points, actually not only at Euroresearch, but in each EU member state or associated country, there is so-called national contact points for each of the different programs of Horizon 2020. And we also have so-called, or more the generalists on the entire program, which are located at each of the Swiss universities and federal institutes of technologies. Now, myself, as national contact point for Society Challenge 5, together with my colleagues for all the different other parts of the program, we're located in the Euroresearch Network office in Bern. And then, as I said, we have Euroresearch offices at each of the Swiss universities. Now, they're not only responsible to inform and advise researchers from that organizations, but for all the different organizations in the canton for which they're responsible for. Quite often, they're your first point of contact. They're the one who have a very broad overview of the entire program and can then also flag to you, you know, which direction you might want to go. We work very closely together with them, so there is no wrong door in that sense. We don't have a mandate anymore. We have a subvention contract with the State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation to inform and advise all parties in Switzerland on the EU framework programs. So all our services are free of charge, and of course we treat all the information confidentially. We have a set number of defined services that we give, but really we just want to respond to what your need is. So should I have made you interested in EU funding, but you don't really want to go on the participant portal and find out about topics yourself, or you just want a bit of more background knowledge, or you're just interested in one particular area and you would like to have the call topics in this area that are open or forthcoming, we would be very happy if you give us a call or if you drop us an email. You don't really have to think first. I put here my contact details and those of Gerhard Gass, who is the food NCP, but you don't really have to find out first if your area, in which part your area is. You can just contact me or contact the regional office, and we make sure that your request is answered by the most knowledgeable person in the network that we have for your specific issue. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and we'd be really pleased if maybe one or the other would consider also looking out for EU funding in the future. Thank you.